Hello, my name is Elowen, and this is the story of how I went to my own mother's birthday party, only to be left outside in the cold while my family praised my sister like I didn't even exist. From the porch, I watched strangers eat cake with my name erased from the table. My gift was stolen, my words twisted, my place in the family rewritten as if I'd never been born. You think betrayal happens in one loud moment, but it doesn't. It's quiet. It's the silence, the glances that turn away, the lies told so often they start to feel like truth. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to be alive, yet treated like a ghost in your own family? Greenville hadn't changed much. The houses stood in tight symmetry, white picket fences with seasonal wreaths that screamed suburban perfection. I pulled my car to the curb, the late November wind tapping gently at the windows like it had something important to say. The colonial-style house in front of me, my childhood home, stood tall and pristine, strung with warm lights and faux autumn leaves clinging to its railings. It looked festive, friendly, but for me, it never truly had been either. I stepped out, clutching a small box wrapped in burgundy paper with a gold satin ribbon. Inside was a handmade journal, bound in leather, with every quote my mother had ever said that stuck with me, her wisdom, her humor, even the biting sarcasm. I had poured hours into it, thinking maybe, just maybe this time, I'd be seen. I didn't expect a parade, but I had hoped for a door to open. I walked up the familiar path, each step crunching over the gravel, like it was trying to remind me of every time I'd walked it with hope, and left with disappointment. When I reached the porch, I rang the bell. Then again, I checked my phone. No reply to the message I'd sent Sable the night before. Excited to see you tomorrow. Let me know if you need help setting up. Nothing from Mom either. Just silence. I tried the door. Locked. Strange. A young man, maybe mid-20s, in a black vest and name tag that said Theo, event staff, opened the side screen door and looked startled. Oh, hi. Can I help you? I'm Elowen. This is my mother's birthday party. Is Isolde here? He glanced at a clipboard in his hand and gave a stiff smile. Yeah. Sorry. I've been told the family area's kind of full right now. They asked that any late arrivals wait out here for a bit. A beat passed. I blinked, expecting him to laugh. He didn't. They said to wait outside? He nodded, apologetically. Yeah, just for now. I think it's a timing thing. They're doing some sort of speech or presentation inside? I stepped back slightly. My fingers tightened around the gift box. Okay, sure, I'll just wait here. Theo gave me a little nod, then disappeared inside. It wasn't just the cold that made my skin feel tight and unwelcome. I looked down at my boots, polished for this, of course, and took in the absurdity of the moment. It was my mother's party, her birthday, and I was standing outside like some package that hadn't been signed for. I moved to the side porch steps and sat down. No coat, just a long cardigan I thought would be enough. The wind disagreed. I pulled my sleeves down to my knuckles and tried not to think too hard. Maybe it's a mix-up. Maybe they didn't mean it this way. But the house was lit up like a stage play, and I was stuck behind the curtain. I heard laughter. Boisterous, full-throated. Music. Clinking glasses. Someone opened the front window briefly to adjust a decoration, and I caught a full view of the living room. That's when I saw her, Alicia, my cousin, the one who forged checks under Dad's name when she was 19 and caused months of legal hell for the family. She was on the sofa, legs crossed, swirling wine in one hand, laughing beside my mother as if the past had never happened. There was a small plaque on the coffee table, reserved for family, right there in front of Alicia's seat. I pressed the gift to my chest like it could shield me from the bite of reality. So she got the chair, the wine, the warmth, and I got the sidewalk. I looked down at my phone again. Still no messages. I typed a quick note to my niece, Ivy. Hope you're inside and warm. I'm outside on the porch if anyone asks. No response. A part of me wanted to storm in, to demand an explanation. But another part, more familiar, more tired, knew better. I had played this game before. I knew the rules. Rule number 1. Don't expect acknowledgement. Rule number 2. If they hurt you, you probably deserved it. I stared into the window a little longer. Sable was talking to a group of guests. She was wearing one of her signature blazers, red, bold, and tailored. The kind of outfit that demanded attention. She laughed loudly, placed a gentle hand on someone's arm, always the charmer, and Mom was watching her like she'd hung the moon. The difference was palpable, not just in the seating arrangement, but in the air, in the affection, in the way they looked at her like she was the embodiment of family pride, and me like I was the forgotten photograph in the attic. I stood up again, pacing in small circles to keep warm. I checked the time. 5:37 p.m. I had arrived at 5:02. 35 minutes standing out here like a stray. The sun was beginning to dip. Shadows stretched across the porch as the wind picked up. I rubbed my arms, fighting the chill. The party inside seemed to grow louder, warmer, more alive, like the very sound of joy was mocking my presence out here. Theo reappeared briefly, walking toward a car. He gave me a polite smile but didn't stop. "Still waiting," I muttered, mostly to myself. My voice sounded smaller than I expected. I thought about knocking again. I even took a step forward. But something stopped me. Not fear, not pride, just exhaustion, a quiet kind, the kind that builds up over decades of being invisible. I lowered myself back onto the porch bench, resting the box beside me. I looked at it for a long while. The ribbon fluttered slightly in the breeze. It looked too fancy now, too hopeful. I thought of everything I'd written in that journal, pages filled with love, admiration, stories. I had tried to capture the essence of my mother, the parts I thought were worth remembering. And yet, here I was, outside. I wanted to cry, but even my tears had grown stingy over the years. Instead, I sat in silence, watching the twinkle lights blink above me. Somewhere inside, a speech had begun. I could hear the faint echo through the window, clinking forks on plates, followed by a cheer. They were celebrating. And I was shivering. I folded my arms, stared at the night sky, and whispered, "Happy birthday, Mom." Then I leaned back, eyes fixed on nothing, and waited for the cold to become numb. I sat on the porch until the chill seeped into my skin, crawling slow and deliberate like an unwelcome guest. The wooden steps beneath me creaked when I shifted, but otherwise the world outside was still. The sky had dimmed from a pale orange into a heavy, velvety blue, the kind that presses against you rather than opens above you. Behind me, the house glowed warm and golden, every window alive with celebration. Yet that glow didn't reach me. If anything, it made the darkness outside feel sharper, more deliberate, as though the walls themselves had drawn a line and declared, "You don't belong in here." Voices floated through the thin night air, muffled yet distinct enough to betray their mood. Bursts of laughter, the hum of chatter, the sing-song rhythm of stories being shared. It was a party's heartbeat, steady and oblivious. My mother's voice, rich and commanding as ever, rose above them all. She had always known how to hold a room, how to make an audience lean closer. And tonight, she wielded that power again. The front window was cracked open just enough to let sound slip through. Maybe someone had opened it for fresh air, maybe for convenience, but for me, it was an opening to a truth I'd been refusing to face. "Tonight wouldn't have been possible without my Sable," my mother declared, her tone dripping with practiced sweetness. "She's been my rock, my anchor, the daughter who always shows up, who makes things happen. Some daughters prove their love through action, not empty words. And Sable, darling, you are my proof." The room erupted in applause. Cheers echoed. Someone even called out Sable's name as if she were a celebrity gracing them with her presence. The sound cut through me like glass. I sat frozen on the steps, gripping the gift box in my lap so tightly that my knuckles throbbed white. My chest burned, not from the cold, but from something heavier, hotter, more unbearable. My own mother had chosen that moment, with a microphone in hand and family gathered, to declare which daughter mattered and which one did not. I wasn't even a footnote. Inside the box rested my own offering, carefully chosen words, a ribbon-tied collection of memories, something I thought might carry weight. But now, hearing her dismiss words as hollow, as empty, I felt foolish. All my sacrifices, working double shifts in college to send money home, covering for Sable when she couldn't pay rent, picking mom up from doctor's appointments when no one else bothered, suddenly felt invisible. None of it counted. Not to her. I tried to cling to denial, whispering to myself that maybe I misheard, that maybe her next breath would mention me. But deep down, in that tender place I never let anyone touch, I knew she wouldn't. I forced myself to stand, legs stiff and aching from the cold. My eyes drifted toward the window again. Inside, people moved toward the dining room, drawn by the appearance of a grand cart covered in a white cloth. I saw a child's small figure bouncing in excitement, heard her squeal. The cloth was pulled back with theatrical flair, and the cake appeared. 3 tiers, elegant and gleaming. The frosting was impossibly smooth, shimmering under the chandelier light. But what hollowed me out wasn't its size or its ornate sugar flowers. It was the photographs plastered across its layers, edible images capturing curated moments. My mother with Sable on the beach, the 2 of them at weddings, at galas, smiling like royalty at staged photo shoots. Dozens of glossy memories, not a single one with me. A smile tugged at my lips, though it was bitter, not sweet. I remembered those days. I was there. I was the one holding their coats at the beach, the one snapping the photo at the gala, the one stepping aside so they could have their perfect mother-daughter portrait. I had existed in every memory, but only as a shadow, a facilitator, the invisible witness. And now those same photos, my work, my vantage, had been turned into decorations that erased me entirely. Even frosting knew who mattered. Applause rang again. Someone shouted, "Only the best for the best!" My mother leaned into Sable's shoulder, glowing, as though she'd birthed perfection itself. I pressed my lips shut, trapping the sound that tried to escape my throat. The gift box on my lap grew unbearably heavy. I no longer wanted to carry it. Rising, I placed it carefully on the porch chair. The ribbon trembled in the evening wind, catching against the splintered wood. That box, and whatever sentiment it held, would be the only trace I'd leave behind. I pulled my cardigan tighter and descended the steps slowly. Gravel crunched under my boots, each sound marking distance from a lifetime of begging for scraps of acknowledgement. I didn't slam the gate. I didn't fling the gift in anger. I simply walked toward my car, letting the night swallow me whole. Inside the vehicle, the faint peppermint scent of the candle I kept tucked in the console greeted me. I sat behind the wheel, staring at the steering column as though waiting for it to tell me what to do. My phone buzzed once. Hope flared instinctively, but the screen only showed a store promotion. Not Mom, not Sable. Still, I typed a message to Ivy. "Hope you're having fun." I left the gift outside. I didn't expect a reply. The dashboard clock glowed, 7:12. My hands rested on the wheel, but I didn't turn the key. Through the windshield, the house still pulsed with light and laughter. I imagined the cake being sliced, plates handed out, crumbs scattered, glasses raised. My absence would go unnoticed. Maybe someone would spot the ribboned box later and assume it came from a kind neighbor. I exhaled slowly, fogging the glass. No tears came. Not yet. But inside, something broke, a sharp, undeniable crack running through the part of me that had always believed that if I just tried harder, if I just proved myself more, I'd be welcomed back into the circle. That belief shattered tonight, and it wasn't the cold that did it. I turned the ignition that night and drove in silence. The roads were almost empty, headlights washing across dark pavement, the radio off. The further I got from the house, the more the knot in my chest tightened. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the clock read close to midnight. I went inside, hung my coat on the rack, and left my shoes at the door like muscle memory. I didn't bother turning on the lights. The house greeted me with the kind of quiet that amplifies your thoughts rather than soothing them. I slept little, maybe a handful of restless hours. When morning came, I couldn't stand being in the house anymore. I showered, threw on jeans and a sweater, and drove to the diner on Main Street. It was early, barely past 7. The booths by the windows were nearly empty except for a pair of older men arguing about football schedules. I slid into a corner booth, ordered coffee, and stirred sugar into it, even though I rarely did. The spoon clinked against the ceramic, and the sound irritated me, though I wasn't sure why. I pulled out my phone. No texts, no missed calls, not a single "thanks for coming," not even from Mom. I refreshed the screen twice as if something might magically appear. Nothing. I opened Facebook. The posts were already there. My mother's birthday, tagged, captioned, shared by cousins and friends. Pictures of the decorations, the guests, the cake with its glossy tiers. Photos of my mother and Sable holding hands, laughing with the crowd. Everyone looked warm, full, satisfied. I searched through them, one by one, hoping for even the faintest evidence that I'd been there. But it was as if the night had erased me. My gift wasn't pictured. I wasn't in a single frame. Even the group shot outside by the lawn lanterns, one I knew had been taken after I left, was posted with the caption, "Family, all together." I stared at that word, all, until it blurred. The waitress came by, refilled my mug. "You doing okay, hun?" she asked casually. "Fine," I said, though my voice was thinner than I liked. She gave me a polite smile and walked away. My mind pulled me back to the night before, to the moment I left the box on the porch. It was a simple photo album, bound in soft leather I'd ordered months ago. I had spent weeks restoring old family photos, scanning, printing, arranging them by years. The first page held a note I had written by hand. "Thank you for being my mother, even when I didn't know how to show it." I remembered pressing the ribbon flat, making sure it was tied neat. It wasn't just a gift. It was a piece of my effort to bridge the space between us. But in the morning light, as I sipped diner coffee, I realized nobody had mentioned it. No one texted to say they found it, or opened it, or even noticed it. It was just gone. Maybe someone moved it, maybe the wind caught it. Maybe, it stung to think, someone threw it away. The idea wrapped itself around me like frost. A gift meant to honor her, discarded like clutter. I pressed my fingers to the edge of the table, grounding myself. My thoughts drifted further back, to an even smaller moment from last night. The porch door had opened at some point, and a man stumbled out, mid-40s, red tie loosened, cheeks flushed from too much wine. He saw me sitting there, clutching the box. "Oh," he exclaimed, fumbling in his wallet. "Thanks for dropping this off, sweetie. Always so reliable." Before I could process, he pressed a crumpled $5 bill into my hand. My lips parted, but nothing came out. My mind screamed, "I'm not the delivery girl, I'm her daughter." But the words never made it past my throat. I just nodded, forcing a weak smile. "You're welcome," I said quietly. He patted my shoulder and wandered toward his car, oblivious. I remember staring at that bill, the thin paper cutting into my palm. My dignity collapsed right there, not in front of him, not loud, but in the quiet acceptance of his mistake. I hadn't corrected him because I knew, deep down, it didn't matter. To him, to my mother, to anyone inside that house, I may as well have been a stranger delivering packages. At the diner, I pulled the bill from my purse. The crumples were sharper in daylight, the corners bent from my fist. I unfolded it, then tore it clean down the middle. The sound was soft but final. I slipped the two halves under my mug, weighed down by the coffee ring. My stomach churned, but not from hunger. The pancakes on the menu no longer tempted me. I picked up my phone again, but this time the reflection in the screen caught me more than the emptiness of my inbox. I looked at myself, hair tied hastily, face pale in the morning sun, and thought, if they didn't want me there, why invite me at all? The answer arrived uninvited, heavy and clear. I hadn't been invited. Ivy had begged on my behalf. She was the only one who still thought I belonged in that house. The realization settled in my chest. It wasn't a slip. It wasn't forgetfulness. It was intentional, erasure disguised as oversight. I leaned back, let the thought sit there, and for the first time, I stopped trying to make excuses for them. The drive back from the diner felt longer than it should have. Every red light became a mirror, forcing me to stare at my own reflection in the rear view. I studied my face as though I might find an answer written there, something that would explain why this endless cycle with my family kept repeating. Why I always left feeling smaller than I had arrived. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the winter sun had climbed high, bleaching the neighborhood in pale light that made everything look too clean, too quiet. I stepped inside, placed my keys on the counter, and sat at the table with the bagel I hadn't finished that morning. I scrolled through my phone without registering a single word or picture, my thumb moving automatically while my mind drifted elsewhere. It was just after noon when a notification appeared, a bright blue tag pulling me back to the screen. I tapped it. My stomach lurched. There, on my sister Sable's profile, was something that made my chest clench so tightly I forgot how to breathe. A photo album. Not just any album, but the album, the one I had stayed up late making. The ribbon, the leather binding, even the careful script on the opening page. It was all mine, but now it was framed by her name, her smiling profile picture, her caption. A surprise I made for Mom. She cried when she saw it. Love you, Queen. My fingers shook as I scrolled through the comments. Hearts, clapping hands, endless strings of praise. You're the perfect daughter. She's so lucky to have you. You always go above and beyond for her. Each comment felt like another stone dropped into the pit of my stomach. I zoomed in on the first page, and there it was, my handwriting, cropped just enough that my name wasn't visible. She had erased me with a snip of framing. My gift, my effort, my love had been stolen and repackaged as hers. Theft, wrapped neatly in affection. I set the phone down and pressed my palms to the table, grounding myself in the silence of my kitchen. The contradiction burned inside me. Something so intimate, something I had poured hours of myself into, had been turned into proof of my absence. A gift transformed into evidence that I didn't exist. It took hours before I sent the message. My words were plain, stripped bare. That was my gift. The reply came quickly, dots blinking before the screen filled with her response. We're a family, Elle. No need to be petty about credit. Mom loved it. That's what matters. Petty, as if wanting to be seen, to be acknowledged, was a smallness in me rather than a cruelty in her. I stared at her words until they blurred. Then I deleted the thread, watching the conversation vanish like so many of my efforts had, swallowed whole by silence. Later that afternoon, another notification arrived, but this one wasn't from her. It was from a family friend. The message read, "Your mom's brunch speech. Are you okay?" Attached was a short video clip. I hesitated, then pressed play. The scene unfolded in warm sunlight filtering through lace curtains. My mother stood at the head of a long table, a glass in her hand. Her voice was strong, her smile assured. Sable's the heart of this family. She always has been. I have 2 daughters, technically, but one of them hasn't spoken to us in years. The room chuckled, soft laughter rolling like it was all in good fun. People nodded, as if they understood, as if they agreed. My hand nearly dropped the phone. I had spoken to her 4 days ago. I had texted her that very morning, asking about brunch. She wasn't mistaken. She was rewriting the truth in real time, turning me into a ghost while the world applauded her. I watched the clip again, searching for hesitation, a stutter, some slip that might reveal it as a mistake. But her delivery was smooth, practiced. She wanted it to be believed. She wanted me gone, even as I stood alive just outside the frame. Shock pinned me to the couch. It wasn't calmness, but a paralysis born of disbelief. The ground beneath me tilted, and suddenly I couldn't trust my own memories. For years, I had bent myself backward to make peace. Therapy sessions, carefully worded letters, dinners where I bit down on my tongue until it nearly bled. Every time, I told myself if I was patient enough, if I forgave more than I was given, eventually she would meet me halfway. But watching her in that video, I understood. She wasn't forgetting me. She was choosing to erase me, choosing the lie because it was cleaner, easier, made her the sympathetic mother with 1 perfect daughter instead of the complicated woman with 2, and people preferred that version. The ache in my chest hardened into something sharper. It wasn't longing anymore, not the same old ache for her approval. It was colder, clearer, not quite anger, but an awakening. For the first time, I stopped defending her in my own mind, stopped telling myself she didn't mean it, stopped covering her cruelty with excuses. Because I saw it now, the erasure wasn't an accident or even neglect. It was deliberate. It was her choice. The following weekend, I found myself standing in front of the Civic Center, watching the valet line snake around the curb. Cars rolled up one after another, sleek sedans, imported SUVs, polished convertibles that gleamed under the yellow street lamps. The night air was cool, with a faint crispness that hinted at the changing season. I wrapped my scarf tighter around my neck, my pulse steady but deliberate. This was her night. Sable's charity auction, her latest grand performance. Invitations had flooded the social circle weeks ago, each card embossed with gold lettering, promising an evening of glamour and generosity. Mine, of course, never arrived. That fact should have stung, but it didn't. Not anymore. I wasn't here for a seat at her table. I wasn't here to be entertained. I was here for one reason only, to deliver an envelope. I had dressed with purpose, black, simple, unobtrusive, deliberate. Not the shimmering black of cocktail dresses, not the sleek confidence of tailored suits, but the quiet, steady black that let you vanish into the edges of a crowd. My hair was pinned back in a way that made me look severe, almost austere. No jewelry, no shimmer, nothing to distract. When I caught a glimpse of myself reflected in the glass doors, the thought hit me with a strange certainty. I looked less like a guest and more like a mourner. Perhaps that was fitting. Stepping inside was like stepping into another world. Warmth and brightness spilled over me, carried on the tide of laughter, the clink of crystal glasses, the smooth swing of live jazz pouring from a corner stage. Spotlights swept across the high ceiling, catching sequins and gemstones as if the room itself were glittering. Everywhere I looked, people posed in shimmering gowns and fitted tuxedos, masks of civility plastered firmly in place. And at the center of it all, my mother. She moved through the crowd like a queen through her court, smiling, shaking hands, leaning in close with practiced warmth. She wore emerald silk tonight, pinned with the brooch that once belonged to our grandmother. I had loved that brooch as a child, staring at it in fascination whenever she let me hold it. Now it gleamed on her chest like a badge of loyalty I no longer deserved. Her eyes swept over the crowd, and for the briefest moment, they landed on me. Recognition flickered, undeniable. Then, like a flame smothered, she turned. No hesitation, no pause. She angled her body toward the man beside her, pasted on another dazzling smile, and kept moving. It wasn't forgetfulness. It wasn't age. It was choice. A stone lodged in my chest. For so long I had told myself she simply didn't notice, that maybe I had been invisible. But tonight shattered that illusion. She saw me. She knew I was there. And she chose not to acknowledge me. My grip tightened around the envelope in my hand, the paper warm against my palm. This wasn't about reconciliation anymore. This was about dignity, about refusing to vanish on command. Then the lights dimmed. Conversation softened to a hush. All eyes turned toward the stage. And there she was, Sable. She stood under the glow of the spotlight like it was made for her. Crimson silk clung to her figure, hair styled to perfection, lips curved into the confident smile of someone who believed the world existed to applaud her. She clicked a remote, and the screen behind her came alive. Slides began to flash. Photographs, charts, colorful graphics, bullet points laid out with precision. At first, I thought the familiarity was coincidence. Then my stomach dropped. It wasn't coincidence. Those were my slides. Not just inspired by them, not just similar. They were mine. The layouts, the colors, the typography. I recognized the careful phrasing, the mission statement I had written and rewritten until it captured exactly what I wanted to build. Empower through education, dignity through opportunity, my words, my vision, my work. And there they were, projected 20 feet high, credited to her. The audience clapped enthusiastically, nodding, whispering praise. I heard fragments float around me. She's brilliant, so innovative, changing lives. My body locked in place. The sound blurred, distant and hollow, as if I were underwater. I had stayed up late for weeks building that proposal, pouring hope into every line. I had believed in it. I had believed in me. And now, stripped of my name, it was hers. A flush of heat burned through me, climbing up my neck and settling in my cheeks. For years, sadness had been my constant companion, heavy, numbing, suffocating. But tonight, sadness curdled into something sharper, something hotter. Anger. It steadied me. It gave me spine. I moved through the clusters of guests, weaving past sequined gowns and polished shoes, until I reached the donation table. The volunteer looked up, smiling politely, ready to accept another check or pledge card. Instead, I slid my envelope across the table. "For transparency," I said softly. Inside was no money, no polite offering, just the truth. A copy of my original nonprofit deck, time-stamped, signed in my own handwriting, dated years before tonight. Evidence that the foundation of her empire had been stolen, proof waiting to be opened. When I straightened, my gaze swept across the room and locked onto hers. Sable, still on stage, still smiling. But for the first time that evening, her expression wavered. A fraction, barely a tremor. But it was there. The mask cracked. And in that moment, I understood something vital. Power shifts when silence ends. I didn't need to speak. My look said everything. Next time, I won't be silent. Then I turned, my steps deliberate as I walked out into the night. The applause continued behind me, muffled by the closing doors, but I no longer heard it. What I heard instead was the steady rhythm of my own breath, strong and unbroken. The line had been drawn. Because the moment you stop running, they start panicking. When I got home from the gala, I closed the door with more force than necessary, as if shutting the world out could erase the night. My heels pinched, so I kicked them off and left them abandoned by the mat, a silent surrender after hours of smiling through teeth that wanted to grit. The air inside my apartment was cool and still, carrying the faint scent of last night's coffee grounds. At last I could breathe. But peace never lingers where shadows wait. The phone on my counter buzzed. Once, twice. Then again, a low, persistent hum against the granite. At first, I ignored it. Probably a reminder to pay my credit card bill, or some generic notification from a news app reminding me that the world outside was still on fire. I let the buzzing continue, trying to convince myself I didn't care. But the sound was relentless, almost mocking. Finally, with a sigh, I reached for it. An unfamiliar number had sent me a string of messages. My thumb hovered over the screen before I tapped it open. Screenshots. My stomach dropped. At the top of the thread, my family's group chat glared back at me. I hadn't been a part of it for years, not since the night I walked away from their constant judgment, their pointed silences, the crueler words buried in sweet smiles. Yet here it was, the group chat still alive and well, still humming with their casual cruelty. The first message was from Sable. Her words sat sharp and precise in black and white. I can't believe she showed. Her face looked worse than last year. The ache wasn't in what she said. It was in how easy it seemed for her to say it, like cruelty was her native tongue. Isolde's reply came seconds later, clipped and careless. "Let's hope she disappears again." I didn't move. For a moment, the world narrowed to those two sentences, glowing on the glass in my hand. I should have cried, maybe. Should have felt the familiar sting of rejection. Instead, I laughed. A sharp, humorless sound that ricocheted around my kitchen. It startled me, the way it echoed, not joy, not amusement, but the jagged release of someone whose wounds had long since scarred over. "Well," I whispered into the silence, placing the phone back down. "Now you've done it." The thing about cruelty is this. It only works when the target still hopes for kindness. Once hope dies, so does their power. And I had no hope left for them. Not anymore. The next day delivered the final fracture. It was Ivy, sweet, sharp-eyed Ivy, who called me after school. Her voice trembled, quick and nervous. "Aunt Elle, I need to send you something. I didn't mean to record it, but you should hear it." Minutes later, a file appeared in my inbox. An audio recording. I pressed play. The sound of clinking dishes filled the room first, the ordinary backdrop of an ordinary kitchen. But then came the voices. Familiar. Unmistakable. Sable's impatient and cold. Once we get the trust restructured, she's out. I'll say she chose to go no contact. Everyone already believes it. Isolde's calm and measured, like she was discussing the weather. She never fit anyway. This way, people will stop asking. Then a refrigerator door closed, and the recording ended. I sat frozen, the phone hot in my hand, as if it had branded me with the truth. This wasn't just gossip now. This wasn't the careless cruelty of a few words tossed into a group chat. This was premeditated, a plan, a future without me, arranged quietly behind my back, while they smiled in public and pretended civility. No tears came, no frantic urge to defend myself. Instead, clarity, cold, sharp, and undeniable. This was war. I texted Ivy back, fingers steady. "You're the reason I won't disappear. Thank you for seeing me." She responded almost instantly with a heart emoji, then another message. "I'm sorry, Aunt Elle. I couldn't just let them keep lying." Her words struck deep, not with grief, but with resolve. They had spent years convincing the world I was unstable, absent, irrelevant. They'd painted me into a shadow and told everyone I had chosen the dark. But now I had something I'd never had before: proof. I opened my laptop. The glow of the screen lit my living room like the opening of a stage curtain. One by one, I pulled up old files, documents I had almost forgotten, tucked away in digital corners, the trust my father left, the pitch decks with my name on them, evidence of nights I spent drafting ideas they later paraded as their own, the contracts, the receipts, every line of evidence that said, I was here, I mattered, I built, I contributed, I existed. With every file I dragged into a new folder, I felt my heartbeat steady. My story was not theirs to erase. No more playing nice. No more waiting outside in the cold while they toasted themselves by the fire. I leaned back in my chair, the edges of resolve sharpening within me. Because some stories begin with betrayal. Mine had simply been confirmed, and this time, I would be the one to write the ending. That night, long after the clock struck midnight and the city outside my window had gone still, I sat alone at my kitchen table. The lamp overhead hummed faintly, casting a pale cone of light across manila folders, printed emails, and scribbled notes. My shoulders sagged from the weight of hours spent piecing together fragments of truth, yet I couldn't bring myself to move. I had finally begun to see the outline of what had been done to me, deliberately, ruthlessly, and the exhaustion pressed down like a second skin. When my phone buzzed across the table, I nearly ignored it. The late hour, the heaviness in my limbs, the temptation to let the silence remain unbroken. But then I saw her name, Cicely, my childhood friend. The one person who had always believed me when no one else would. A flicker of dread and hope stirred in my chest as I pressed accept. "Elle," she said without preamble, her voice low and urgent, "you need to sit down." "I'm already sitting," I answered, though my fingers tightened around the phone. "What is it?" There was a pause, the sound of her breath steadying before she spoke again. "I've been digging. Your father's will, the original one, wasn't what they showed you. I found the unamended copy, the notarized version, filed with the county before they altered it." The word struck like a blade. "Altered?" "Yes," she whispered, as though the truth itself were dangerous. "Elowen, you weren't just included. You were central. Co-owner of the house, co-trustee of the family fund, executor if anything went wrong. You weren't supposed to be erased. You were meant to lead." For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. The silence around me felt alive, thick, pulsing with a strange mixture of grief, vindication, and the sharp ache of finally being seen. My father had trusted me. He had known my worth. That trust had been buried, smothered beneath the lies of those who had gained the most from my absence. I swallowed hard, steadying my voice. "Can you send it?" "You'll have it in the morning," she promised, then softer. "But Elle, what are you going to do with it?" I looked at the scattered documents before me, evidence of years spent proving I belonged in a family that had denied me at every turn. For the first time, I felt calm. "I'll present it myself. They've always made this public, every cutting remark, every exclusion. Let's see how they handle the truth in public, too. Morning came with an odd clarity. I dressed deliberately, pulling on white, a color my mother adored, a symbol they weaponized as innocence and purity. I wore it as armor. My hair was slicked back, my face bare of anything but the faintest touch of makeup. A single folder rested in my hand, its contents heavier than any shield. By noon, I stood at the threshold of the country club ballroom, where the family's post-party brunch was underway. The place gleamed exactly as my mother loved it, linen-draped tables, crystal pitchers catching the sunlight, a pianist coaxing gentle notes from a grand piano in the corner. Laughter floated above the clink of champagne glasses, the air thick with privilege and comfort. I walked in without invitation. Conversations faltered, a ripple of discomfort spreading through the room before voices rose again, louder, as though my presence could be drowned out by noise. But I did not falter. Step by step, I cut through the chatter, my heels clicking against polished floors. Eyes followed me, some curious, others sharp with disapproval. I waited. Timing was everything. Only when dessert plates were being passed around, the hum of contentment settling over the room, did I stop. I set my folder on the table with deliberate calm. "Before you try to remove me again," I said, my voice even but unyielding, "you should read what he left behind." The room stilled. A collective breath held. I handed copies to my mother, to Sable, and to the family lawyer, who sat smugly at their side. Their eyes flicked down the pages, bolded lines, notarized stamps, my father's unmistakable signature. Isolde's composure cracked first. Her mouth opened, then closed, her hands trembling as she adjusted her glasses. Sable, always quicker to recover, sneered. "That's a fake, a desperate attempt to claw your way back." But before I could reply, another voice rang out behind me, strong, unwavering. Cicely. She had slipped in quietly, her presence now steady as bedrock. "Actually," she said, holding up her own copy, "this was pulled directly from the county clerk's office yesterday. Certified, official, unaltered. This," she tapped the page, "is the original." The lawyer shifted uneasily, color draining from his face. With a reluctant nod, he confirmed, "She's correct." Gasps rippled through the room. A cousin's fork clattered against porcelain. My mother's lips parted, but no words emerged, only the stark whiteness of disbelief spreading across her features. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I simply stood, hands resting lightly on the folder, gaze steady. For years, I had been invisible, reduced to whispers and omissions. But in that moment, they could not look away. I leaned forward just enough for my words to cut through the silence. "You tried to erase me, but some truths can't be deleted." And then I straightened, letting silence stretch like a verdict across the ballroom. For the first time, they were forced to listen. The noise of the party still clung to me when I closed my eyes that night, like the echo of music in an empty hall. Yet by morning, it was gone. The adrenaline that had fueled my escape from the ballroom had dissolved into something sharper, quieter. An ache that wasn't grief, but recognition. I moved through my small apartment deliberately, the way you move after waking from a long fever. My kettle hissed to life, steam curling into the pale light that crept between thin curtains. I set a mug on the kitchen table, and that was when my eyes fell on the box. The cake sat there like an intruder, glossy white cardboard, tied with a ribbon that looked far too elegant for what it carried. The courier had dropped it off late last night, after I had already shed my heels and silence wrapped around me like armor. I hadn't opened it then. I didn't need to. I knew what it contained. The cake they had displayed so proudly, paraded around the party as if sugar could disguise cruelty. A cake that no one had touched once the truth had cracked the surface of our evening. Now, in the light of day, it looked absurd. Its untouched frosting gleamed beneath the faintly translucent lid, still perfect, still whole, a monument to their performance, a symbol of everything they wanted to look sweet while leaving me hollow. I pulled the box closer. For a moment, I considered pushing it straight into the trash, letting it rot among scraps and coffee grounds. But then something steadier rose inside me. A final gesture. Not of love, not of bitterness, of release. I reached for a blank card from the drawer, smoothed its surface against the table, and wrote in the neat, deliberate script that had carried me through exams, resumes, and resignation letters. This was the last. There was no anger in those 4 words, no hidden plea for recognition, just finality. A boundary drawn as cleanly as a blade. By 9 o'clock, I was on the phone with the courier service. "Pick up at noon," I instructed. "Address to Isolde Marin." The operator asked if I wanted to include a message. "It's already inside the box," I replied, and hung up. When I set the pen down, I exhaled. No more gifts that could be twisted into symbols of desperation. No more offerings misread as pleas for approval. This wasn't a peace treaty. It wasn't an olive branch. It was a closing door. I wasn't there when the box arrived at the country club, where remnants of the gala still lingered. But Ivy told me afterward how it unfolded. At first, my mother smiled. Of course she did. She brushed her fingers along the ribbon as if savoring the performance of forgiveness. The guests leaned closer, waiting for the moment of reconciliation, the drama of a daughter bending back toward the family's orbit. She lifted the lid. The tears inside gleamed under the light. Pristine frosting, intricate piping, untouched layers stacked in fragile perfection. Then she saw the card. Her smile faltered. She read the words once, then again. Her lips tightened on the second pass, and for the first time in years, silence pressed down on her. Sable, ever the performer, filled the air with a brittle laugh. "She always had a flair for drama," she declared, lifting her champagne as though toasting my absence. But Ivy swore she noticed the tremor in her sister's hand, the way the glass nearly slipped as she set it down. It wasn't rage that swept the room. It was discomfort. That silence was worse than shouting because it meant everyone there understood. They saw what I had done, what I had said without ever appearing. I was done playing the role they had cast for me, done showing up only to vanish beneath their carefully polished stories, done letting them erase me, one celebration at a time. Later that week, Ivy found me at the little indie bookstore we'd begun frequenting. The place was unassuming, tucked on a quiet corner with mismatched shelves, creaky wooden floors, and the scent of strong coffee drifting from the cafe. My mother had once dismissed it with a wave of her jeweled hand. "Too dusty," she'd said. "Too small, not worth my time." But for Ivy and me, it had become something else entirely. A sanctuary. That afternoon, I stood near the poetry shelf, tracing titles with my fingers when Ivy quietly snapped a photo. I didn't notice until later when she posted it online. The caption was simple: "Some places heal what others break." The image showed me smiling faintly, a small stack of books in my arms. But what struck me most wasn't my expression, it was the detail Ivy had arranged in the background. On a side table sat a modest frame holding an old picture of me and my mother. We were both laughing, caught in a moment before the lies, before the divide. Ivy had placed it there herself. When I asked her why, she shrugged. "Because people need to see it. That once, she looked at you like you mattered." I touched her arm, gratitude pressing heavily in my chest. "Maybe one day she'll walk in here," I whispered, though I didn't believe it. "That's on her," Ivy said, her voice firm despite her youth. "But I'll always meet you here." And I knew she meant it. It wasn't victory I felt as I closed my eyes and breathed in the mingled scents of paper and coffee. It wasn't triumph. It was quieter, steadier, closure. The kind of ending that leaves space for healing, even if the person who once wounded you never returns to finish the work. The weeks blended into months, and what once felt like unbearable silence grew into something else entirely. For years, silence from my family had been sharp and punishing, like a knife pressed just beneath the ribs, a deliberate omission that left me desperate to explain, to excuse, to mend what I hadn't broken. I used to scramble to fill the void with my own apologies, as if words could earn back a place that was never meant for me. Now, though, the quiet wasn't quite the same. It still stung, yes, but it no longer had the power to hollow me out. It became a background hum, something I noticed but no longer answered to. I filled the quiet with work. Cicely and I signed the lease for the bookstore in early spring, the kind of day when winter clung stubbornly to the wind, even as the dogwoods bloomed defiantly against it. The building had once been a hardware shop, its brick walls carrying decades of stains, dust, and forgotten nails embedded in the mortar. It smelled faintly of rust and oil, a scent that clung even as we threw open the windows. We spent long evenings there, painting walls in mismatched coats of cream, hammering nails into stubborn beams, rearranging shelves we'd scavenged from estate sales and thrift shops. Our laughter often echoed through the hollow rooms, blending with the sound of sandpaper against wood and the metallic thud of a hammer. For the first time in what felt like forever, the labor didn't feel like survival. It felt like creation, like we were building something that could hold us instead of something that could collapse around us. It was during one of those evenings that Cicely sat across from me at the small table in the back of the shop, her coffee cooling between her hands. Her expression gave her away before her words did. "She's sick," she said finally, her voice even but heavy. I didn't need to ask who. "Late stage?" Cicely continued, lowering her eyes. "And she's not. She's not taking visitors." For a moment, the old reflex returned, sharp and insistent. The urge to reach for my phone, to beg, to demand entry into her world before it was too late. The instinct to fight for recognition, even at the very end. But the impulse faded quickly, like a wave breaking against stone. I only stared out the front window of the shop, watching sunlight catch on the glass, spilling across the empty sidewalk. "She always liked quiet exits," I said at last. There were no tears, not even the urge to cry, just a steady ache, like something I had already grieved long before her body began to falter. In those weeks, Ivy became my anchor. Every Sunday she appeared at the shop, without fail. Sometimes she carried her backpack slung lazily over one shoulder. Other times she balanced a tray of coffee with exaggerated care, proud of not spilling a drop. She filled the silence with teenage noise, stories about school, dramatic retellings of inside jokes, little bursts of chaos that left the shop feeling alive instead of heavy. One afternoon, she arrived with a wooden sign she had painted in art class. The block letters were bold, uneven, but confident. "Second chances, rare books, rare people." She leaned it against the counter, her face expectant. I laughed softly, tracing my fingers over the grooves of the painted words. "It's perfect," I said. And it was. Because that was what the shop had become, not only a refuge for dusty novels and forgotten memoirs, but for people like me, people who needed somewhere that didn't erase them. "Sometimes we find family," I told Ivy quietly. "And sometimes they find us." She only grinned, already rearranging a display she insisted was all wrong. The summer festival came with its familiar chaos, bright tents, the scent of kettle corn and fried dough drifting on the air, children running past with faces painted like tigers and butterflies. Cicely, Ivy, and I manned a small bookstall beneath a white canopy, selling paperbacks to curious passers-by. I thought it would be just another day, unremarkable except for the heat and the laughter. And then I saw her. Across the park, sitting alone on a weathered wooden bench shaded by a wide oak tree, was my mother, Isolde. She looked smaller than she had in my memory. Frail. The woman who had once commanded rooms with sharp glances and sculpted hair now seemed diminished. Her once careful style surrendered to strands of thin gray that fluttered in the breeze. She folded her hands in her lap and stared at nothing, her gaze lost somewhere distant. For a long moment I debated turning away, pretending not to notice. I had built so much distance brick by brick, and seeing her there threatened to knock a hole straight through the wall I had worked to protect. But something within me, curiosity, or maybe the last stubborn spark of a daughter's longing, held me still. As though sensing it, she turned. Her eyes found mine across the laughter and music and the stretch of summer grass. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. But she didn't look past me either. For 3 long seconds, our gazes locked. Hers tired, mine steady. And then she turned her head, slow and deliberate, facing away. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't love. But it was acknowledgement. And for me, somehow, That was enough. That night, as I closed the shop with Cicely and Ivy, I replayed the moment in my mind. I thought of all the years I had begged her to see me, only to be dismissed, ignored, erased. And now, with her strength thinned and her lies stripped away, she had looked, not warmly, not long, but she had looked. "They always said I was too sensitive," I murmured aloud as I locked the front door. The words weren't for anyone in particular, just a truth finally spoken into air that would hold it. Maybe I was. Maybe that's why I remember everything. I turned then, letting my eyes rest on the shop we had built, the soft glow of lamps over the shelves, the rows of spines promising stories of people who had endured, the framed photo Ivy insisted should stay near the register. My life wasn't empty, it wasn't erased. "But now," I whispered, "I don't need to be remembered, just not erased." And for the first time in decades, I believed it. Not every wound needs to scar loudly. Some of us heal quietly, by building a new home inside ourselves. Families are supposed to be where we feel most seen, most safe. But Elowen's story shows us that sometimes the deepest wounds come from the people closest to us. When love turns into erasure, the real act of courage is choosing to build your own place of belonging. What about you? Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful family stories like this one.